Well, everybody has gone online because of Zoom. It's kickstarted this essentially this big social phenomena of people are okay with being recorded. Because if you think back to, 2018, if you tried to record someone in a conversation, it was not okay. People would freak out. And you go to 2025, and nowadays, if you're not recording, if someone's in a meeting with me and they're not recording, like, I feel like they don't care about what I'm saying. I'm like, what I'm saying is not important enough that you're not going to tell your AI about it. Like, I want you to record my meeting because that means you're going to, have good action items. But when we were raising that seed round in 2022, it was sort of a crazy pitch of like, okay, well, everybody knows COVID's going to end. We're all going to go back to the office, but we're still going to do these Zoom calls. We're still going to be recorded. And the AI is going to get smart enough that this data is going to be fundamentally useful and every app in the world is going to use it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Founders in Arms podcast with me, Emma Vakhan, co-founder and CEO of Mercury.
And I'm Raj Suri, co-founder of Lima and Tribe. And today we have with us David Gu, co-founder and CEO of Recall.ai. Welcome, David.
Thank you. It is great to be on.
So I met David when you were at Y Combinator. Was it 2021? Which batch was it?
We were Winter 20.
Winter 20. Oh, wow. That was a while ago. And I think you were working at Winter 20 was like COVID times, right? And what were you working on then? Do you remember our first meeting?
When we first met, I think we were working on this call recording tool for user researchers and product managers. We had built this product because during the batch, we had done a ton of user interviews and we just saved these files to our hard drive. And later, when we rewatched these recordings, we were like, there must be a better way. So we first started out building this tool for user researchers and product managers to record their calls. And that's what we're doing when we met.
Yeah. And where were you when we met? Do you remember? Like you were not in the US, right?
I think physically I was in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada.
Right. And you had just dropped out, in your first or second year?
It was the first semester of my second year. So I had been in Waterloo in total for about 18 months, and then I did Y Combinator.
Right. So dropped out of Waterloo first year in the pandemic and, building this company, which is not was not that sexy back then, although Zoom was taking off and there was, the pandemic was driving video conferencing stuff. So, I wrote a small check at that time, probably your most important investor, I think you would agree. But,
This is a very leading interview.
Yeah. Fast forward to today, what are you announcing, David?
So we announced our $38 million Series B, led by Bessemer, just last week. So this is very recent. And it's been a very exciting journey from building this product in 2020, pivoting, launching Recall in 2022 to today. We're now powering over 1,000 AI companies and seeing a very interesting slice of the market. Phenomenal growth, both in the infrastructure business, which we're building, but in our customers, we just see dozens of AI companies growing frighteningly fast. It's a very exciting time to be in technology.
And this is the same company, like you did a pivot. I guess you pivoted from like analyzing customer calls to providing infrastructure for other companies to build tools like that. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the same legal entity, same company, same founders. The story is that Amanda and I first started building this call recording product, and we actually worked on it for quite some time. We worked on it for 3 years. We acquired thousands of customers, and we processed millions of hours of video. And while we were running this product, I was the guy responsible for keeping the infrastructure up. So I wrote the first version of the call recording software. I would scale the infrastructure. I would get paged in the middle of the night. And for 3 years, that was just every single day, 24/7, making sure this infrastructure stayed up and was reliable. Because the product itself, the recording part, was only supposed to be a small part of the product. The real value was supposed to come from the analysis and the insights and the search. But we ended up spending 80% of all our engineering time just on the infrastructure because it was such a hard technical problem. And for our customers, it was so critically important that their calls were captured accurately. With the infrastructure, like if we did a really good job, if we invested a lot of time and energy in making it excellent, the customers wouldn't notice because the product would just work. But when we wouldn't do a good job, if we ever had downtime, every single one of our customers got very, very mad. So we spent a lot of time and energy on making this infrastructure high quality.
Is there a lot of companies that have pivoted from kind of application to, oh, they had to build a piece of infrastructure that was really hard to build that application and they pivot to their infrastructure? I feel like that's a very common pivot scenario, but I'm having a hard time thinking of a company that has done that.
AWS.
Well, AWS, yes, but that wasn't a pivot. That was just like a second product. Is there like a full pivot from like application to the infrastructure that made the application?
So Plaid is a good example of that. Plaid, they were originally trying to build a fintech, and then they discovered connecting to the bank is really hard.
Yeah, that's cool. Was it a difficult decision to make the infrastructure pivot? I feel like pivots are like quite an emotion. Like my last company had 4 full pivots, and every one of them was was a painful journey of like feeling like you failed, and then like finally trying to do something, getting enough momentum to do something different.
I think the hardest part of the pivot was at that point we had a very small amount of revenue, but we had a few thousand customers, and the customers liked the product. We knew that this wasn't what we wanted to build long term. Like we realized with that product, we were like the number 5 option in a highly crowded market. And the entire reason we were building a startup is so we can do something new and useful to the world. And it became very clear to us that being the number 5 option in a very crowded market was neither new nor useful to the world. But we had a bunch of customers who actually really loved the product, and it felt bad turning off this product that they relied on. And we actually, after we pivoted, we ran the old product for 6 months to give people time to migrate. We were actually Recall's first customer. So the first thing we did when we created Recall is we took this old product and we refactored the backend to use Recall's API. So we were actually our first customer for Recall. It was a difficult decision, but I think what it came down to was we realized we can continue down this path of building this product, but what was happening at the same time was large language models were just getting extraordinarily good. In 2022, I remember maybe a year before or so, ChatGPT was released and you could talk to it, and it was incoherent. It would string together poor sentences. And then 8 months after that, it would string together normal sentences. And then 8 months after that, it was genuinely good. You could talk to it like a human. And we saw these other companies in the space building products using LLMs that 18 months ago would have been beyond the frontier of AI research. So these 2-person companies building products that 18 months ago would have been science fiction. And they all needed conversation data. They all needed the data from meetings to feed into these LLMs. And we realized we had really high quality infrastructure. We ran it in production for 3 years. We scaled it very large. It was battle tested. And there's all these other companies that needed this infrastructure, and they were building much, much more interesting products using LLMs. So we realized, well, the way that we can be the most valuable in the world is we can deliver this infrastructure to all these apps that are then going to go on and build really cool things.
Did you do something that gave you like extra confidence in the market? Like, did you sell the product to one of these companies and you saw there was a lot of interest, or did you just feel like there was enough? Yeah, did you feel like you understood the market enough that you just kind of built it and hoped that like customers would come?
We understood the problem very, very well, because we had lived the problem for 3 years, and over those entire 3 years, it was our number 1 problem every single day. When we launched that call recording product, I didn't expect the infrastructure to be hard. But what ended up happening was for 6 months after we launched that product, every single night I would either get paged or I'd have a nightmare that I was getting paged. It was brutally hard infrastructure to run, and I ended up having a recurring nightmare about this infrastructure going down. And even 3 years later, it was like I just get randomly pulled out of feature work because there's some sort of infrastructure thing going on. And, 2 weeks of progress would get wiped out because I'm like, I need to go and get the infrastructure stable and scaling. So we had very deep conviction that this was a truly hard problem. The one thing that wasn't clear at that time was how many apps would actually need this infrastructure. If you think about 2022, you had Zoom, you had all the Zoom recorders, but there's this big open question of what else is there? And our thesis at the time was that conversations are this huge data set that's going to be important to every sort of business app. The call recorders are really just scratching the surface, but in 3 to 5 years, every single B2B software is going to use conversations as a fundamental data source because that's where all the information in every company is stored. 99% of all the information never gets written down. It's just communicated person to person through conversation. And fast forward to 2025, that's actually come true. So now we're working with companies like HubSpot and ClickUp and Monday.com, companies which you wouldn't think of as call recorders. These are just B2B software companies that want to tap into the world's largest data set, and that's conversations.
And David, in terms of how you've managed to also transition from a technical leader to also nailing sales. Like you mentioned some of the big customers that you've gotten. Tell us a little bit about how that journey has been for you, because it's obviously you don't get into this thinking you'll be a salesperson or a marketer, and this is a whole thing I know you've had to learn, right?
Yeah, this is a great question. Myself and my co-founder, we both come from a technical background. So I studied software engineering at Waterloo. Amanda studied computer science at Waterloo. So we both went into this with zero sales experience. And the way that we learned how to sell is we just did it a lot. So for the first $2 million in revenue, this was pure outbound sales. We did all of these deals ourselves. We didn't have a salesperson until we were past $2 million in revenue. And we were just on hundreds of sales calls. And if you do something enough, eventually you start to get good at it. Nowadays, we're selling to much larger companies, selling much more complex deals. But I think, the message or the lesson here is that sales is a very learnable skill. I think lots of technical founders or technical folks have the impression that sales is some sort of crazy black magic, like you can only do sales if you're super social, if you're super, extroverted. But I really think that's not true. Fundamentally, sales is helping people understand the value of your product and helping them navigate their internal buying process. And these are things that anyone can get good at. And if you're a smart, motivated founder, you can learn to sell.
What would be 2 or 3 things you would tell yourself, like you started your sales journey? What would you tell yourself to maybe speed up the learning? What would you say? Oh, David, do it this way, and then you'd be a much better salesperson.
I think the first and foremost thing that I would say to myself in 2022 is you've just got to ask for the deal. You've got to ask for the pilot. You've got to ask for the commitment. When we first started selling, we were so nervous to ask for things. But I think the biggest lesson is you really just have to ask. You really just have to say, hey, if we can get pricing aligned, if we can figure out what a good price is, can you commit to signing this contract by end of month? And people say yes, and they'll do it. Before we would, just bump along in the process and hope something would happen. But in sales, you really need to be the one making things happen.
The way you described it, it's not just the ask. The ask is very specific and it's time bound. I think those are the 3 parts. Like make an ask, make it extremely specific, get them to commit to something and put a time on it. I like that as advice. I actually ended up mostly leading the sales team at my previous company, and I had a similar thing of I never had a self-image as a salesperson, and I mostly had the self-image of not being a salesperson, I would say. The 2 things that I took away from it is number 1, don't sell. As in, I think if you make it too transactional, it just doesn't feel good to me when I'm doing it, and it doesn't feel good to the other person. I think it's much better to just go like talk about the problem, talk about like why you're excited to fix the problem, like all of these things that are not really sales. It's just like having a conversation. That to me is like a much better way to do it. And at the end of it, I think you can like they really feel like you really care about fixing their problem, which is very different from like you're trying to sell a product to someone. And the second one that I always thought was important is that it's just a numbers game. Like I feel like some early sales founders get like too attached. They're like, oh, I'm really trying to close this one deal. I'm like, you should have 10 deals going on right now, or like 15 deals, like, and you just gotta play the probability game of having enough things out there that you're trying to close. Like it should never be about that one deal that you like put everything on your company on.
Yeah, I remember kind of the early days when I was learning to sell. I came from the same background as you guys, and it was all new journey to me. But it one thing that kind of inspired me was like watching like movies about salespeople, and also like reading books about
Oh,
like
yeah. What's the best movie about salespeople that you were like, this is the most inspirational?
I don't know if there's inspirational, but they teach you a little bit about like sales. Is like Glenn Ross is a famous movie about like a bunch of people, a sales team competing with each other to get like the prize. Like normally the best salesperson gets a President's Club, and the second person gets something, and the third person gets a set of steak knives. That's like that's what
Classic.
it's a classic quote, right? So, and then there's Boiler Room, which has a bunch of quotes about sales. Those are some movies I remember that got me into like the competition part of selling, like which is like I thought kind of inspired me, which is like I'm a competitive guy, so I like to compete and like compete against myself as well, like try to see if I can do better, right? So I used to enjoy just walking into restaurants and seeing if I can close them on the spot. Like that became like a thing for me. Is like just walking into a restaurant and like leaving with a signed contract. That was for like SMB sales. Later on, it was enterprise, and that was a big, a whole different game. Which I'm sure, David, you're seeing the differences in those processes, right? But I think founders should treat sales like a fun challenge, like a fun, level of a game that they're trying to master, right? Because it is fun once you like get into the habit of it, and there's like real. Obviously there's real like feedback loops, and there's this joy of convincing someone to do something that maybe they didn't know they wanted in the beginning of the conversation.
I think you could probably say that about everything a founder does. Like you should treat everything as like a little bit of a game to like, because there's a lot of like things that are difficult as a founder. I think it's like kind of like VC fundraising. I mean, that's kind of a sales process, but even like sometimes actually like when you have to like really grind for like 10 hours and like code something like really difficult, like I often thought about it as like a game where I'm trying to like, fit this puzzle and get it done. I think that's like a good mindset to have when you're trying to do difficult things.
David, I noticed you guys like also really nailed the social media marketing piece of it. So Amanda's posts are getting get a lot of traction. You tell us about how you kind of figure that piece out as well, because that seems to have also been a good lead source for you.
Yeah, great question. So Amanda's LinkedIn has maybe 45,000 followers. And I think when we first started working on it and taking it seriously, we were at maybe 3,000 or 4,000. And this was a little bit more than a year ago. So we've grown the following about 10x in the last year. I think the biggest learning from that is it's actually very related to sales in the sense that the thing that the best salespeople do is they give you something of value so that you want to engage with them. And the things that the best social media posts do is they give you something of value so you want to engage with them. I think there's the same sort of fallacy that gets founders when they're trying to sell and when they're trying to do things on social media, where they're maybe at the beginning super focused on what's in it for them. Like, how can I get more customers? How can I get more views on our posts? But the things that's worked really well for us on both sales and in Amanda's LinkedIn is just putting out stuff that's very valuable, putting out stuff that's helpful to our target customer, to our buyer. And from that, we get a lot of engagement. Like we post a lot of content about building a startup in the early days. Many of our customers and buyers are people who are going through that journey right now, who are building startups in the early days. And that's been a really strong source of leads for us. It's actually really funny because Amanda walks around conferences sometimes. Like there's HubSpot's inbound conference just last week. There was SaaStr a few weeks before, and people will just recognize her, which is super crazy. The startup ecosystem is just not that big, and it seems like every 3 out of 4 people in the startup ecosystem has heard of Amanda, and because of that, has heard of Recall.
It's pretty cool. I mean, I don't know of too many tech founders who have mastered social media marketing. I think that's like a unique, a unique skill. Something that, I think someone like Cluely actually has kind of figured out, but like that makes them, unique. But you guys have done it obviously in a much better way. Like they have a bunch of clickbait stuff, but it is a unique skill, right?
I would say it goes back to something David said earlier, that you just have to practice at these things, right? I think when I started Mercury, I was like, oh, it'd be good to have a social media following, and I just started posting, and I would try to force myself to post like at least once a week, and try to have something useful to say. And I remember at the start, like no one cared, and the posts were probably bad. But you just keep doing it, and like there is like a dopamine hit to it as well. Like every third post or something will like go viral. Like someone really interesting will comment on it, and you'll get like you get that kind of reinforcement to like do more of it. But it does take it is work though. It's not easy because you have to like keep doing it, and nowadays I have less time to do it. But it is very doable if you just like keep at it, and like if you're willing to do once a week for 2 years, that's like 100+ posts, and I think you'd figure it out eventually.
Yeah, I think it's true. Like the repeated element of it is very important. The daily your posts or whatever. But I think the crafting of the good post is also important. And I think Amanda's posts are uniquely well crafted. I think that's one thing I noticed is like they really put a lot of thought into it. And on LinkedIn, for example, you can get a lot of virality if you have some people like who are also well known on LinkedIn to comment on it. I think you guys have been able to do that.
It was actually a very interesting process to decide whether or not we wanted to pursue LinkedIn as a channel. Marketing is very interesting in the sense that you and everybody else doing marketing are competing for a scarce resource. There are only so many social media hours a day. There are only so many eyeballs, and there's only so much attention. So one of the hardest parts of doing good marketing is finding a channel where you can stand out, where you can be the number one in that channel, because everybody else is just drowned out in the noise. And when we were looking at our early user acquisition, we realized actually a decent number of people were coming from LinkedIn, and we had maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago made some posts. We had made posts on occasion, and we got a disproportionate number of customers from those posts. So we decided, well, it seems like one channel that nobody else has really cracked. We think we have a really good shot at being number one here. This is a channel where if we get it right, it seems like our customers are on LinkedIn, our product buyers and our startup founder buyers are on LinkedIn. And if we get this channel really right, we can be the number one in this channel. And that is extraordinarily valuable. So there is actually a little bit of decision making in what's the channel we're going to actually invest time into, and why was LinkedIn that channel?
Imad, you're a recent convert to LinkedIn, right? You haven't been a big believer. A lot of tech people look down on LinkedIn, I feel.
I have a hard time. Like for a long time, LinkedIn had like really bad product sense, right? There was all of this, like, tell Raj he's a great PHP engineer or something. Like there was just they threw a lot of stuff out there, and a lot of it was bad. I do think they eventually figured it out, and the feed method actually works, and it's like pretty engaging. I mean, still like the notifications are really badly made. Like there's just a lot of things about LinkedIn that are just like kind of sucky. But it is like where the reason I kind of converted to it is, X after, or Twitter after the Elon acquisition just went down this like very non-business route, right? Like it used to be like I was mostly an X person, and it used to be mostly like a business community from me. It was like where all the VCs were, where all the founders were. And then it just became like much broader. It's like a lot more politics, a lot less business. It's actually even now kind of hard to find like interesting tech like takes and founder advice or whatever. So I was just like, hey, I had at that point like whatever 50,000 followers on X and like I think around 15,000 on LinkedIn. So then I pivoted, and now I have like 35,000 on LinkedIn. I mean, I still like X a little more, I would say, as a user. But I definitely think if you want to get, yeah, to some extent, I guess, yeah, Mercury and Recall have like similar audience and similar similar aims when it comes to social media. And I think if you want to get in front of founders, like LinkedIn is probably a better place to do it now.
Yeah, totally agreed.
I also think with marketing, I mean, I don't know if you feel this, David. It sounds like maybe you don't. I found it's actually kind of, especially at the start, it's hard to know what's going to work. Like my general strategy is to just try everything a little bit and then like double down on things that work or don't work. So, when we started Mercury, we did everything. I was like, obviously, there's the Twitter stuff. There's like, we did podcasts, we did in-person events, we did like everything I could think of that might work. And then over time, it was like, oh, in-person events, 100 people show up and it's so much work to do it. Whereas if I do a post on X, I can get 1 million people to see it in like 10 minutes. So like you kind of end up like, maybe that's obvious, but I just feel like you can learn a lot just by doing a lot of stuff and then doubling down on what works.
I think I agree with you that it's very hard to know beforehand what's going to work and what's going to not work. I think one thing that makes it extra difficult is there's some things that won't work until you've sunk 6 or 12 months into them, which is tough. And I think this is something that creates lots of problems for startup founders as well when they're building new products, where you'll see people build a new product and then spend 3 or 6 months on it and decide, hey, it's not working. And you look at the product and the product is bad. And it's not like the idea was bad, but 3 months is not a lot of time to build something world class. When we are figuring out new channels or when we are figuring out new products, one of the first things that we do at the beginning is we get a very clear understanding of, from first principles, why should this work? What are the things that we understand about the world where we believe this is highly likely going to work, and how are we going to disprove these things? Like, what are things that are going to tell us this is not true? For example, for LinkedIn, one of the things that we believed was that our buyers are on LinkedIn. We're a developer product. That seems kind of weird, but we realized many of the people that initiate a buying process for Recall are product people and founders, and those people are on LinkedIn. And the thing to disprove was, well, if it turns out we post a lot on LinkedIn and it's all just random big tech people commenting and reacting and stuff like that, then we know it's not going to work. We know it doesn't make any sense. And then we started posting. And then what happened was it was all startup people. It was all people that we knew from our network, from Y Combinator, from companies we had sold to and interacted in the past. And we started getting leads. People that we knew in the startup scene, we'd reach out to them, say, hey, do you want to use Recall? And they'd say, of course. By the way, we've seen Amanda's posts on LinkedIn and they're phenomenal. And that was something that actually validated our understanding of why this is a channel that should work. The fundamental hypothesis was that startup people are actually on LinkedIn. And we tried to prove or disprove that. And it turns out that startup people, in fact, are on LinkedIn.
Like, are you saying that you have like a systematic approach to this? Like when you're thinking about a new product or something, you actually write down like, this is how we would know it's working or not. This is how much time we'd give it. This is like why it might work. Like, do you actually write out like a whole thesis around like, the success and failure criteria for it?
More of what I would say is it's less of like, okay, we have an objective threshold. This is success. Like 6 months, it needs to generate us $2 million in pipeline. But it's more of like, we try to get a very direct understanding of each step in the funnel and why it should work. For example, if we're shipping a new product, we want to understand, okay, well, who is the customer that will buy this? Why would they choose this? Why is this the obvious number one choice over every other alternative? Once they buy it, how do they receive value from it? How does this change as they increase their deployment? And what you end up with is a few things which you believe are true, and now you're trying to disprove these things, because if these things are not true, then it means your thesis is wrong. But if these things are true, you should be very confident that this new product is going to work. Like, one new example here is we released a desktop recording SDK. So if you've seen apps like Granola, they let you record your meetings without a bot. And this is valuable because for many applications where people are building these sort of AI products, you don't want a bot in the call. So we released this desktop recording SDK, and the things which we're confident are, one, we think that people want a method of recording that's not a bot. Two, we think that building a method of recording that's not a bot, that's very reliable, that's very power efficient, that gets you all the metadata, we think that's a deeply hard technical problem. And three, we think that there's a large number of app developers that are going to go after this form factor. So those are the three things that we believe are true. And now we're trying to validate these things. We've shipped this desktop recording SDK. We've got people who've chosen it over using a bot because they like the form factor better. Okay, so that validates one of these parts, that there's people out there in the world who want this form factor. Two, we have people who've tried to build it themselves, and they've realized, hey, this is really hard. We don't want to do this ourselves. We want to buy from a vendor that does this as their entire job. And we've actually built it ourselves, and we know it's super hard. So we validated number two. And then number three is that, there's this large market of app developers that want to build this sort of non-bot form factor. And that's the one that currently we're validating, and we're seeing strong traction. We're having dozens of companies deploy apps on the desktop recording SDK. So it's more of like having a strong understanding of why this thing should work and what that hinges on. Like, what are the underlying things going on in the world that will make your thing work or will make your thing not work? Because generally, to get feedback from the market, it's a very long cycle. So you want to have a good understanding of the inputs to that.
I wanted to pivot the conversation a little bit. You just did the successful Series B. There's not that many people that have done Series B and like kind of talk about the fundraising process for it. Like, how was it different from doing the Series A? What were your kind of big takeaways and lessons from raising? You raised 38 million, right?
We raised 38 million. It was a great round, great people involved. I think the biggest surprise for me during the Series B process was Series B is still a early stage round. When you're at the seed stage, you see Series B companies and you're like, wow, these are mature businesses. But it turns out that's not true. When you raise a Series B, 99% of what goes into investor decision making is how can you go from 10 million in revenue to $1 billion or more in revenue, like 100x growth. And that would have been surprising to me if you said that to me in the seed round, because in the seed round, you think Series B companies, they're big and they've got things running smoothly and it's predictable. But 100x growth is always, it always involves taking big swings. It always involves expanding your business and making it massively better. So the amount of focus on the growth story and how can Recall be a generational company and how can Recall be a one-of-one company like Google or Microsoft or Facebook, that was a surprising amount of the focus. And honestly, I think that's great. We are at the very earliest stages of the journey. There is so much more that's going to happen in the future. And I would say that today is the most exciting time to be in technology in the history of humanity. So I feel grateful that we're around at this point in time.
The funny thing is, David, it's probably like, I guess Elon Musk is still pitching Tesla in the same way, even as a $1 trillion company, right? Like, I think there is an element of like selling the vision and the dream and how can this be 100x is like, I think important at like every stage of the company. But I see what you're saying. It was also surprising to me. The same thing, like even in our Series C, which we just did, which, it's a $3.5 billion company, it is still about the dream and like the vision and like how, like the biggest competitors out there can be like hundreds of billions of dollars. Like it's very much like 100x kind of pitch, which I think
And
it
it
has
didn't
to
used
be.
to be that way. I don't think it
You
used
don't
to be
think so?
that way. Like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, like people, the size of the tech, like the maximum sort of valuation most people could imagine was in like the single digit billions, right? So it's like, like getting to 100 million ARR was always the goal, at least up until the late 2010s, I would say, right? Like, so I don't know if you remember this, Ahmad, but like every time you did a financial projection, it was always supposed to be like talking about getting to 100 million ARR or whatever, right? Like that was the target that they taught you in Y Combinator, right? It's like, how do you get to 100 million ARR? But now you're
I
talking
don't know
about
if that's
billions of
true. I
ARR.
think actually the best VCs were looking still further. I remember doing this pitch. This was kind of funny story. I think this is 2013. I did this pitch for Hayes at my previous company, and I had a graph up there. And there's like projections, and you're just kind of making this shit up, really. So it's projections, and like it did get to 100 million, like in like 10 years or something like that. And I was doing like a partner meeting for Andreessen Horowitz, and Mark Andreessen, and I had this like vivid memory of this. He walked up to the like, it was on this like big TV screen. He walked up to this TV screen and we're like, really go in there, and he's like, "Is that it?" So this is 2013. At least like Mark Andreessen was not happy with 100 million in 10 years in 2013. So I do think like the best VCs were still thinking like, okay, what is like the generational company? And to me, I was like, 100 million is a lot more. Like, what are you talking about? I had to make a lot of crazy assumptions in these projections. Why are you saying is that it?
But if you look at the number of tech companies, yeah, maybe Mark Andreessen was ahead of his time. But like if you look at the number of tech companies that have exceeded a billion in revenue, like the number of has exploded over the last 10 years, right? So that number has become a lot more achievable. Obviously, the market caps have increased a lot for these top tech companies as well, up to trillions and more. So like the pie has gotten a lot bigger. So maybe
Yeah, I mean,
that's
a
why.
$1 trillion company is like a pretty recent phenomena, right? When was it? Like 2020, 2019? The first $1 trillion company? Yeah.
And people coined the term, Eileen Lee, I think, coined the term unicorn because unicorns were rare, at that time, and now they're a lot less rare. I mean, people are getting to $1 billion valuation. A lot more companies are doing it now, I'm sure, than ever before. So
So Raj, your overall point is like, people think of this market as much more unbounded, and therefore they really want
yes,
to build, like even at Series B, C, or whatever, they really want to feel like you can hit that unbounded kind of like escape velocity.
yeah, exactly.
Actually, do you think that's a really good point? And I've heard a few pitches nowadays, which is like, a completely reasonable B2B SaaS founder, like it's growing nicely. It's like they've reached like 5 million ARR, and like they're finding it impossible to raise the Series A. And I think it's partly because they can't make this like pitch, like they can't really claim that they have an unbounded market. Like it's just obvious, like, it works well, and it's like growing like 3x, but like they have a hard time claiming they can get to $1 billion in revenue in a reasonable kind of way, and it's really hard for
Which
them
is
to
what.
raise.
Yeah, I mean that's why I think David's raise is really impressive. Like it is more of a SaaS product, right? It's not like a pure play AI product, right? So that shows kind of like how well he's
Yeah, but
kind of
David's
built
claiming
a company.
unbounded, man. David's going like, "Hey guys, every single conversation in the world is going to be recorded, and this is like 100% of the most important data in the universe." Yeah, I can just imagine David's pitch.
Is that what you said, David?
I think that that was a very good summary, having not heard it.
Yeah.
Um, what's really funny? Before I did my Series B, this is 2021. Initially I was like, "Oh yeah, this is going to be much more straightforward than my Series A. I'm just going to show the numbers, and it's just obvious, and etc." And then I did talk to some founders, and they were like, "Oh, it's really about the vision and all this stuff." And then just before the Series B, I watched this. There's this like documentary. It was on Hulu with Adam Newman and like WeWork. Uh, and like you listen to like Adam Newman speak, and I mean, this is just office space being cut in like pieces, right? It's like the least visionary company, in my opinion. Sorry if anyone disagrees, but the way he talks about it, it's like, hey, we're redefining the we. Like we're we're building communities that will like change. Yeah, it's so like crazy visionary, and like it really got me like inspired. I was like, if he could talk about office space like that, like I should be able to talk about banking in this like much more visionary way. So if someone wants some inspiration on how to create this reality distortion field, I feel like Adam Newman is like one of the greatest.
Yeah, I haven't seen that documentary. I'm going to check it out now. I've heard great things about it.
It's
Yeah.
pretty entertaining. I mean, it's all about his failure. Like he really, it's like it's kind of the downfall of Adam Newman, but still, like there's something really inspirational about how far he took that thing. It was like a $40 billion company. It's just office
Yeah, I
space.
know. It was crazy. Yeah. I've heard great things. I mean, he's raised another round, I guess. Oh, he's raised more money for a new company, right? From
Yeah, he
Andreessen, I
raised like
believe.
this, like what was it, the life human token or something? Yeah, he kept going for sure.
David, one thing I want to ask you. I mean, I've been through all your raises, so your Series A was a lot harder than your Series B, right? Like, did you have to feel? I think you learned also how to raise through that process. Like, what were some of the lessons you learned in your Series A and Series B? Because you were raising in tough times, I believe. Like, it's my recollection.
Yeah, I would say the Series A was more difficult than the Series B, and the seed round was much more difficult than the Series A, and the pre-seed was much more difficult than the seed. So the fundraising has been getting easier over time. I feel like part of it is just my skills have been improving, but I think also another part of it is the thesis has become a lot more clear and a lot more validated by the market. When we were raising our seed round, it was kind of a crazy pitch. The pitch was essentially that, well, everybody has gone online because of Zoom. It's kickstarted this essentially this big social phenomena of people are okay with being recorded. Because if you think back to, 2018, if you tried to record someone in a conversation, it was not okay. People would freak out. And you go to 2025, and nowadays, if you're not recording, if someone's in a meeting with me and they're not recording, like, I feel like they don't care about what I'm saying. I'm like, what I'm saying is not important enough that you're not going to tell your AI about it. Like, I want you to record my meeting because that means you're going to, have good action items. But when we were raising that seed round in 2022, it was sort of a crazy pitch of like, okay, well, everybody knows COVID's going to end. We're all going to go back to the office, but we're still going to do these Zoom calls. We're still going to be recorded, and the AI is going to get smart enough that this data is going to be fundamentally useful, and every app in the world is going to use it. In 2022, this was a little bit more obvious to us having been in the space for a few years, but to everybody else in the world, it was super, super unintuitive. And even in the Series A, we have these great companies, they're growing really fast, but there's always this specter hanging over us of, well, are people going to be comfortable with being recorded? Are people going to continue to have these sorts of meetings when COVID ends? And in 2025, it's become very clear that one, people are 100% okay with being recorded. It's like in the first days of the camera, people felt nervous about having their photograph taken. But nowadays, if you try to take someone's photograph and they're weird about it, that's on them. Recording has made that same jump of, if someone's recording a conversation and you don't want them to, that's sort of on them now. The social framework has changed. And LLMs have gotten so obviously smart that any conversation you can feed into a frontier model and get a human level analysis or a superhuman level analysis and summarization and data extraction. So I think over time the thesis has just become much, much more obvious, and also the market traction has supported that. There's over 1,000 AI companies using Recall, building great products, and many of them are seeing 10x year-over-year growth at millions of dollars in revenue. So pretty insane traction with companies that are using this data.
That's excellent. Sounds great, man. Thanks for sharing that. Should we jump into the rapid fire? We have a rapid fire section here.
I'll go first. Which tech founder inspires you the most these days?
Apart from me.
Or me?
I think the thing that's been really fascinating for me as I've gotten to know more people and as I've gotten to run this company for longer is that people have vastly different experiences, and there's so much you can learn from every single person. I'll give off, a few examples, right? Recently, I was chatting with Wade Foster from Zapier. He's got this amazing story of raising basically $0 and building this huge company that every SMB is now using, and it's just this excellent product done very, very efficiently. I was also reading Amp It Up by Frank Slootman, and he's just got this maniacal focus on high quality execution. And his whole thing is you can just increase the intensity. You can align your entire company around just doing a really good job. And if everybody in your company is doing an excellent job, that's a 10x improvement over whatever is currently going on. You see founders like Elon who do all sorts of crazy shit, but you talk to people who work at SpaceX, you talk to people who work at Tesla, you talk to people who work at Neuralink, and all of these people deeply believe in the mission. And they're like, the work that I'm doing is going to be transformational for humanity. And that's a very impressive level of mission orientation to have in any company. If you talk to people who work at your company and they're fully bought in and they're saying, well, the work that I'm doing here is going to be critically important for the future of humanity. I mean, that's a very impressive thing to have accomplished. And, the more founders we meet, like I was talking to Solomon Hykes from Docker, he's an angel investor in us, and he's got this amazing story about building Docker and getting every single developer in the world to adopt this as a core part of their workflow. There's so many people who've done so many amazing things, and I feel like from each of these stories, there's a lot you can learn.
What's the most uncomfortable piece of feedback you've received?
When we were raising our seed round, I got a piece of feedback. Somebody said, "This was the weirdest pitch I have ever seen," and then they left the call.
You just left it.
And this was 10 minutes in. Yeah, they just left. They're like, "I'm out." They literally said the words, "I'm out," and then they left the call. And then afterwards, I was like, that was really weird. That's the only time it's ever happened. But I think this was one of our early pitches. Like, we hadn't pitched that many people in total. So I was very worried for a period of time that I was just, pitching such a deeply weird thing, that was the reaction I was getting from people. Turns out that was more of a one-off. But I think that the change...
I mean, I think that's like pretty disrespectful. Like, I think it's fine if they I think it's fine if they gave you like actual feedback and said, "Oh, this I don't get this or that," but like just saying it's weird and then saying I'm leaving the call, that just seems disrespectful.
And presumably, this was a decent investor, like for you to even talk to them, right? So.
But I think that actually inspired a really positive change for me, which was I started recording my pitches and I started watching every single one, because I was like, if I am doing something really weird, I want to know. And watching my own game tape from pitches, that has actually been one of the most helpful things. I would recommend that to any founder.
I could never do that. Like, I hate the sound of my voice that I'm just hearing over.
Dude, you're doing a podcast.
I don't listen to my own podcast.
You don't listen to podcasts? Okay.
I mean, I'm already listening to it. I don't need to listen to it again.
Yeah.
Wait, so you record the pitch and then what? Like, every single pitch you listen to, or only like if you felt it didn't go well?
No, I listen to every single one.
Even
and
now?
the ones that go... even now, like, if I'm doing a pitch over Zoom and, the other person lets the bot in, I will watch that call recording and then I will make improvements to my pitch. And this is actually a classic sales tactic. Like a thing that every salesperson should do is watch their own game tape. They should watch their own meetings. And when you watch a meeting, you discover a million things that you did poorly that you should pay attention to next time. And because it's happening live during the call, you don't realize.
Are you changing like your kind of facial expressions and things like that? Or is it literally the content of the words you're saying? Like, you're saying, "Oh, I should have responded like this when I said that instead."
It's the content of the words, it's the ordering of the items, it's the tone and enunciation, it's the video conferencing setup. There's just so much stuff.
This is like a pro move. I've never heard of anyone recording the pitching. Maybe everyone's doing it. Raj, have you ever heard of this?
We did this a little bit at our last company. We recorded meetings and we watched them over again. I actually listened to our podcast, Ahmad. I actually do listen to it and try to see how we can improve. So I send you some notes as well. But like, I think this is a good. I agree, it's a pro move. So congrats, David, for doing it. I think it should be done by all founders, including you, Ahmad. Start watching your stuff.
I just don't know if I could do it. David, what would you say is the most personally difficult part of your founder journey to date?
I would say that the most personally difficult part of the founder journey is it was really the early days because we worked on various things for nearly 4 years before things started working. I would say that Recall only really started working in mid 2024, sometime after we raised our Series A. And we started in the winter of 2019. So it was 4, maybe nearly 5 years, depending on how you count it, before things really started working well. And I think that's hard. I think that the one piece of advice that I'd give to founders is don't give up. I think there's a certain aspect of survivor bias in there.
To be specific, David, like what was hard? Like it was like demoralizing, or like you just didn't have enough money, and you found like what was hard about it?
I mean, those are two examples of things that are hard, and both of those were hard and more. I think the hard things about building a startup that's not working in the early days. Well, one thing is we had raised very little money. I think from the first 3 or 4 years of operations, maybe first 3 years of operations, we actually might have been net cash flow positive. We were spending so little money. We had raised very little. We just raised the YC 150K. We raised maybe 200K after that. And YC's advice is when you raise money, assume that's the last money you're ever going to raise. So we were like, oh shit, we've got to make this business work. And we only have 300K. We've got to be very frugal and we've got to be very good about collecting cash from our customers. So we were very good at those things. And we were very efficient in the early days. We didn't spend very much money. The other part of it was just being super under-resourced. We were competing against much larger companies back when we were building that call recording product. It was just me and my co-founder doing everything, doing engineering, doing product, doing sales and marketing. And we were just like, we just need to outwork everybody else. So we worked every single day of the year, like 7 days a week, 16 hours a day for like 3 or 4 years. And we were the only people working on this thing. We were like, well, if we don't have money to hire people, I guess we just have to, put in the extra work to make up for that. So that was also really hard.
That's insane. You literally worked 7 days a week for 3 years?
There is a lot of stuff to do.
He's in early 20s, man. Come on. What else does he have to do?
I mean, I tried doing that in my 20s, but like I actually can't work 7 days a week for like a sustained period. I can do it for a month or something, even in my 20s. But after a month, I just like I stopped being productive if I'm working 7 days a week. So I'm really impressed.
There's just a lot of stuff to do, and we're like, we have to make this work. I think the last part that was hard is if you start a startup and before you started the startup, you were generally good at what you were doing. Like you're a high performing employee or you're a good student or whatever. The thing that really changes is all of your positive external validation goes out the window. Nobody tells you you're doing a good job. In practice, you might actually be doing a very bad job. And there's a lot of things that you need to learn before you actually become good at running a startup.
I mean, in some ways, you are like basically continuously failing, right? Like I think even a sales process, like you're mostly failing, and then every now and then you make one sale, right? Like it is a continuous failure process, which is like actually kind of hard.
And actually, I even at this stage of career, I'm seeking out that feeling of failure. I think that's where you learn the most, and also that is actually the joy of founding a company is that feeling of failing. And
I think you don't want to be playing a game where you're guaranteed success, because that's not a game worth playing. Like it's only worth it if there's a chance of failure, which is like which is kind of an interesting mindset.
Yeah, and the first time you go through it, it's kind of scary. I totally agree. That transition from like being successful at everything and then being a total failure and knowing that you're failing and feeling that you're failing is very difficult to do it for a sustained period of time.
I think one thing that helps is if you played a lot of sports, because I played a lot of sports as a kid. So I just like, you just any sport you play, you lose a lot. And I think that gives you like, it makes you realize like the game is worth playing for the sake of playing and not for winning alone. Which like imagine playing a game of tennis and you're just always winning. That would just be a very boring game. So yeah, good mindset. Should we wrap?
Yes, let's wrap. David, this has been great. I'm proud of you. You've done great stuff over the last 5 years. So yeah, keep it up, man.
Yeah, thanks for joining, David.
I appreciate that. It's great to be on.
Congrats on the round.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening. Please leave us a review on whatever channel you're listening on. Makes a big difference to the algorithm and to the success of the show. And see you all next week.